Are you tired of feeling crushed by criticism? Do negative comments get on your skin and leave you feeling defeated? Have you ever wondered why some people seem bulletproof to criticism? Nothing can penetrate their unshakable self-esteem to perform at the highest level. How do they do this? And why can't you be the same? Well, there's 3 reasons why the very best are able to take criticism in their stride. And instead of letting it extinguish their confidence, they're actually able to use it as fuel to ignite their performance. And the best thing is all 3 of these things are simple to implement in your own life, starting literally today. So let's get started. Over the past year, Kylian Mbappe has probably been the most criticised footballer on the planet. After playing along both PSG and Real Madrid last year in transfer and contract negotiations, it seemed that whatever his decision about where to play in the 22-23 season, he would face a bucket load of criticism. Join Real Madrid for free and be called a snake by an entire nation, or stay with PSG and be called unambitious and a greedy money grabber just after more of that sweet oil money. Fast forward a year and it's more of the same. It seems Mbappe is willing to ride out the last year of his contract and finally join Madrid in 2024. But again, this is causing outrage among his club, its fans and owners. But here's the thing, despite the endless criticism over the past year, Mbappe is still played like an absolute beast. In the 2022-23 season, he racked up 41 goals in 43 games for PSG, including a career season high of 29 in Ligue 1. He also became only the 2nd man ever in history to score a hat-trick in the World Cup final. Many pros crumble at the first sign of criticism. They panic, they retaliate, or they hide away shutting down their social media. But Kylian Mbappe, despite being one of the most criticised men on the planet over the past year, has not done this. He's actually stepped up to the plate more than ever after recently becoming captain of the French national team. How does he do this? Well, Mbappe knows that those who are the best at handling criticism are able to separate behaviour from identity. They know that criticism, when you unravel it, is often directed at what we do, not who we are. You see, the reason why most people can't take criticism is because they take things way too personally. They think anything said about them that's negative is an assault on their character and identity. It's human nature to want to be accepted and valued. So when we receive negative feedback, it can trigger feelings of inadequacy or a fear over not being good enough. So we start to doubt ourselves and it can shake our self-confidence. But Mbappe understands that when people are criticising him by calling him every name under the sun, they're actually just criticising his behaviour. He's not stupid. He realises the transfer fiasco last year was a mess on his part, and he could have handled the situation better for sure. But he knows that although he did an arguably bad thing, this doesn't make him a bad person. And he's in a position now where whatever decision he makes surrounding his future, he'll still end up being criticised by millions of people. So even if we get criticised by someone with a comment about our identity, such as you're useless or you're stupid, we don't actually have to accept that label. Instead, what we should do is reinterpret that comment in terms of behaviour. So instead of you're useless, we need to actually interpret that as we did a useless thing. Doing this detaches our sense of self from the criticism, and this means we can actually deal with it in a more logical way rather than an emotional way. And to do this, the next thing we should do is ask ourselves one simple question. What is the behaviour I need to change? Only in asking that question, thinking about our behaviour instead of our identity, can we use criticism to actually get better. But I get it, sometimes it seems that the criticism is still unjust and unfair, and that it comes from all angles. What should you do in those situations? Well, let me tell you a personal story. You see, I was very lucky to go to Cambridge University, one of the best universities in the world, a place where the smartest kids in the UK and across the globe go to study. So many geniuses have blessed the very lecture theatres and the Harry Potter style dining halls that I too would have the privilege of hitting up on a daily basis. And this was a big deal for me. No one in the history of my family had even gone to university full stop. So I was an outlier. I didn't fit the typical mould of what a Cambridge student looks like. But you know what? I believed in myself. I knew I got there through hard work and dedication. I'd spent thousands of hours in the library between the ages of 16 and 18 to warrant my place at this elite university. So when I got there and I had to do my first ever essay, I was actually quite pumped. This was an opportunity for me to prove my worth and prove that I should be part of this cream of the crop students. And I'll admit, when I started, I was a bit rusty. I hadn't actually written an essay in over a year because I'd done a gap year teaching in South Africa. So I spent all week in the library, devouring books, research papers and articles. And I spent hours doing this. All in, I reckon a good 12 hours was spent reading, planning and writing this essay. And this allowed me to craft arguments that I thought were pretty decent, and they would impress the supervisor that I had to hand this essay into. So I finished it up, sent it off to her, and I was pretty chuffed with myself. And then a couple of days later, I had a supervision with her. These are basically small group sessions of 2 or 3 students sitting down with the academic to talk through your essays and explore the topic in a bit more detail. And these things can feel like interrogations. But I rock up to this one and it's my first one ever. I'm a little bit nervous, but also excited. And it's this tiny little office. And I go through the door and there's this tiny old lady behind the desk. And in front of her are 3 seats. And this lady doesn't say hi, she just asks the name. So I tell her Sam, and she kind of tuts under her breath. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And she picks up the essays, thumbs through them, finds mine. And then she looks at the essay, looks at me, looks at the essay, looks at me, looks at the essay one last time, then looks at me. And she just then sort of flings it to in front of one of the chairs behind the desk. And then she looks me dead in the eye and says, "Next time, don't leave it to the last minute." I immediately feel myself go red in the face, and then she just says, "Sit." So I sit down, pick up the essay, and there's all these different scribbles of her comments on it. So I start looking through those. And in the margins, there's just all these things like wrong, incoherent argument, this doesn't make sense, poor grammar. And at this point, I just want the ground to open up and swallow me. And then I finally get through all these, and then there's a couple of sentences at the end of my essay, the sort of larger feedback. And so I don't remember what the second sentence said, but I'll always remember what the first one said. Just there in big black text, "I can't believe how poor your writing is."
Damn. I'm sorry.
And at that point, I'm no longer red in the face. I've gone completely white. You know, my stomach has dropped into my arse and I'm questioning my very existence. But luckily, this awkwardness was broken by another student entering the room. And so the academic asked for her name, and this girl says her name, and then the academic says, "Oh, good first attempt." And then literally about 5 seconds later, the other student comes in, and then the academic says, "Oh, you must be so-and-so. I really like your conclusion." And the next hour of this supervision was just a blur. I probably said like 10 words the entire hour, even when I got asked questions head on. It was one of the worst, longest, soul-destroying hours of my entire life. And I remember getting back to my dorm room and sitting on the edge of my bed and just thinking to myself, what the fuck am I doing here? Throughout school, I was always told that I was a good writer, and I even got 100% in one of my English A-level exams. So this was a real ego blow. And my naive 19-year-old self took this personally. But after stewing over it, a question popped into my mind the next day. Does she have the right to criticize? And as much as it hurt to admit, the answer was yes. This woman had probably been an academic for around 40 years. She had read tens of thousands of essays throughout her career. So if anyone was to know what a good essay looked like, then it was her. So the point is here, when it comes to criticism, you have to consider the source. You have to evaluate the credibility and intentions of the person offering criticism. Constructive criticism from someone you respect or someone who knows what the hell they're talking about is infinitely more valuable than criticism from just some random, some idiot, or someone who just doesn't have your best interests at heart. And in asking that question that I asked of, do they have the right to criticize, you open yourself up to so many possibilities of actually making improvements. You may have a coach who's particularly harsh, demanding, and it seems that you can never please him. But most of the time, this is actually coming from the right place. He wants you and your team to be successful. He wants you to challenge yourself and push yourself to your limits. Coaches, parents, and teachers, 99% of the time, they just want to see you win. So they criticize in order for you to improve, to push yourself out of your comfort zone, or to just do things properly. And the more skilled, experienced, or successful that source of criticism, then the more you should listen. Eventually, I got to the point where the criticism on my essays didn't hurt me anymore. I learned not just from that one supervisor, but pretty much every other one that I had at Cambridge, that it was the norm to poke holes and find flaws in people's writing far more often than commenting on the good. Just ticking and saying well done fosters complacency and doesn't push people to actually make improvements. And the very reason Cambridge breeds all these hyper-successful people is because it forces them to confront and improve on the bad day in, day out. But one major problem, obviously, is that not a lot of criticism is actually that useful. It's great at pointing out what we're doing wrong or what we need to improve on, but it rarely actually tells us how we're supposed to make those improvements. So what do we do in those situations? Well, a great example of this comes from a footballer I recently worked with. For a while, he had a coach who would always get at him for being lazy, and this surprised the player because he was a central midfielder who liked to play box to box and thought that he always covered a lot of ground. So he thought that this criticism of being lazy was unjust and unfair. So the first thing I said to this athlete was, well, what's the evidence for you being lazy? Because even if you immediately disagree with something, you have to take a far more detached and objective stance to understand where this is coming from. Unfortunately, this player's team uses GPS vests to track everything, and so the player sought out data from the data analyst guys and found out that actually he was top of the table in terms of distance covered during matches. So this left him scratching his head because the data said that he wasn't lazy. And so the player's next move was the most crucial one that we should all take if ever we receive criticism that we just can't wrap our head around. And that is to simply seek clarification. Again, most people's response to criticism they don't immediately agree with is to snap back. But a very important but difficult skill is to actually see things from someone else's perspective. And we can only do this by actually asking them to clarify what they mean by something. So this player arranges to see his coach and he asks him directly, what do you mean I'm lazy? Because I've seen the data and I run the most. And the coach responds, you may run the most, but you don't make the runs that we want you to make. And so it turned out the player wasn't making enough high-speed runs, short, sharp sprints during pivotal moments. Things like counter-attacks, last-ditch defending, darting into the box for a chance to score, all those sorts of things. And the data did then show that for that type of run, the player was actually one of the lowest on the list. So suddenly for this player, this was a bit of a light bulb moment. He realized that yes, although he was covering a lot of ground, he was doing a lot of that at basically one pace. He wasn't really shifting through the gears, and that's what led to the perception of him being lazy. And of course, this goes back to the coach for not being as specific or clear in his criticism, but that's just the unfortunate reality. Most people are actually pretty poor at giving criticism, particularly the really bad stuff. And so the best thing we can do to overcome that is to seek clarification. Actually ask people directly head on, can you help me see what you mean by that? And if the criticism is fair, then the person giving it should be able to actually expand and explain things so that you can actually better see where they're coming from. So moving forward, just remember that the criticism is just a form of feedback, and all feedback is just information. Sometimes that information is false and we should disregard it. But other times that information is true and we should look to act upon it proactively with logic rather than reactively with emotion. If you move away from thinking, how do I feel about this information, to thoughts of what can I do with this information, then you'll be in a better position to handle criticism in a way that can elevate your game. But if criticism still makes you angry, then check out this next video here on how to use anger effectively.